Is Jim coming on?
I didn't hear from him. I think we're on and connected. Yep, it says streaming. We'll give it a couple minutes. I think we're on. Yep.
Hi, everybody.
Yep, it says streaming. We'll give it a 9 o'clock, but we'll give it a minute, let a few people jump on. So I'm sure everybody's rushing to their computer with bated breath. It's 9:01. Is everybody ready?
Yeah.
Great. I'd like to welcome all of you who are watching to our first live stream at Ghost Ed. We're very excited to be doing this for you, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves first. I'm Philip Wyatt. You guys should know me by now. Linda?
I'm Linda Hilwood. Glad to be here.
Steve?
Hey, guys. I'm Steve Dills.
And Miss Heather.
Hey everyone, I'm Heather Lee Landon.
And everyone's professional profiles is on our page, so I would encourage everyone to check them out and get to know all of our educators, because we have some amazing people who are graciously volunteering to help us with our live stream. So go to the page and check everybody out. First, I'd like to ask Steve if he'd say a little bit about what our group and our page is about, please.
Sure. So obviously, welcome everybody to Ghost Education 101. The idea around and behind this is simple. And we know that there are a lot of these education groups, and we're hoping to kind of stand out amongst those. The idea behind, this page is kind of to build something that harbors, a safe environment for truth, to share ideas, opinions, knowledge, techniques, skills, all of the things that not only a new person coming to the paranormal field, but also somebody that maybe has been in the field for a little bit and has come to that conclusion that they want to kind of expand their horizons, try different things, different methods, techniques. I know I was in that spot a number of years ago where I kind of thought I had everything solved. And I approached it from a very scientific mind. And then I started meeting people, and my kind of views and the ways that I looked at the paranormal changed drastically. And it opened a lot of different doors and possibilities, and for me, a lot of research. So the whole idea here is to bring all of that into one spot, somewhere that's safe. We're going to be bringing in different speakers, different panelists, and kind of diving into different topics, different subjects relating to the paranormal, that hopefully you guys can get involved in. We are going to be actively watching the chat. So we're hoping that you guys are going to dive in, get involved in the conversation, ask questions, because as much as we plan out some of these panels, the main objective here is for learning, for you guys, for us, for everybody. I mean, you're going to see folks from all walks of life on this stream. I can tell you right now that the way that I investigate is not the same that Philip or Linda or Heather investigates whatsoever. However, we can all sit down at the table. and we can all talk about that respectfully, and we can share our different ways. There's no right way in the paranormal, and so that's what this is about. A safe environment, share some information, some knowledge. Hopefully, all of us learn something in the process and have fun.
Thank you. That was perfect. Tonight's presentation is a little different from what you've probably been seeing. This is a slideshow presentation, so you can actually see the equipment that we're talking about. We're going to start out with a little paranormal history for you because we really need to know our past in order to have a successful future. I'm really big about knowing where we've come from. And so we're going to get into it, and I hope you enjoy it. Is that up?
It is.
And Heather is going to start us off.
Okay. Hey, everybody. We're going to start off with the history of paranormal investigation. Mankind has a splendid fascination with ghosts and paranormal investigation. From the plays of William Shakespeare to the fictional adventures of Scooby-Doo and the Ghostbusters, literature and pop culture have embraced the notion that maybe things really go bump in the night. While ghost stories are fun for many people, we typically take them with a grain of salt. However, the true history of paranormal investigation is serious and complex. Since the 1800s and perhaps before, various organizations and groups have made attempts to apply scientific principles to the exploration of paranormal phenomenon. In recent years, the popularity of ghost hunting has increased thanks to the abundance of television shows that follow the adventures of modern-day paranormal investigators. These individuals are following in the footsteps of others who have been simultaneously celebrated and maligned for their interest in ghost and supernatural phenomenon. The original ghost hunter was Harry Price. If there was a single person to come out of the golden age of spiritualism and the investigations that surrounded the movement with the most influence on the field of paranormal investigation as we know today, that person was Harry Price. Also, although disliked and distrusted by many, there is no denying that he was one of the most influential figures in the formative years of ghost research. Harry Price was born in London in 1881, a son of a grocer and a traveling salesman. His interest in the paranormal began in 1889, where he saw his first performance by a stage magician. By the time that Price joined the Society for Physical Research in 1920, he had already begun his career as Britain's most famous ghost investigator. He spent many hours at alleged haunted houses and in the investigation of spiritualist mediums. Price died from a heart attack at his home in Pulborough on March 29, 1948. He was only 67 years old, but his tremendous labors and volumes of research remain today.
And here's a picture of some things in Harry Price's kit. Just a little bit different from what we tote around today. But we're going to get into what some of these things are. Investigation equipment and methods of Harry Price. His kit contained a sketch pad, pencils, trigger objects, matches, talcum powder, steel tape for sealing off of a room, which he would initial and date to prevent contamination, string, and bells for hanging on doorknobs. A bottle of liquid mercury would be placed in a bowl and put on the floor and would show movement. It would get ripples in it like water. Much, I guess that's kind of our early geophones that we use now. His cameras were an Adams and Company reflex camera that would have used infrared film, which was really, really early infrared film, very crude. The Cine camera, which would have taken Agfa Novapam film, which is, I tried to find it. They don't even make it today. I wanted to have an example, but you can't even get it. That would work in these cameras. These cameras would be placed in active areas with trigger weights connected to a thermograph. So any change in temperature in the room would release the shutter. Now that was very, very clever. Now we just have DVR systems, so we don't have to worry about it. Next, after Harry Price, came Peter Underwood from 1924 to 2014 is when he passed. And he developed these classification of 8 types of ghosts. And these are kind of funny when you think about them. There's some that we have today, and then some of them are just kind of oddly categorized, but I thought it would be interesting to go over. He said atmospheric, residual, historical, cycle reoccurring, appear at regular intervals or significant dates, modern, which I would suppose that meant someone died last week and shows up haunting, ghosts of the living, crisis or deathbed, family, and haunted objects. Now we've combined today, I think, a lot of those like residual, reoccurring, historical. We've kind of lumped some of those into one category now. That's how we put them today. These are some techniques that you could use without any type of electronic equipment. First of all, using your senses, listening, seeing, feeling, observation, and documentation. Your body is your best instrument. Bells, ping pong balls, styrofoam cups, which I will explain, peanuts and talcum powder, and a compass. An old way of detecting if a trigger object moved was to place a circle of talcum powder, put the trigger object in it. You would seal the door off with the tape, initial the tape. Then if you went back in and there were marks in the talcum powder, then obviously something would have had to have moved that trigger object. And if the room was sealed off and not contaminated, then what explanation is it other than paranormal? And this is something that I have tried, styrofoam cups or peanuts, because if a ghost creates a static electric field, we know what happens when static gets near styrofoam. It clings, correct? So place a row of styrofoam cups where you think activity may be happening and put a camera on it and see what happens. It's a very inexpensive way to have a static detector. Ping pong balls, you can mark those so you can see in the camera if they change or move positions. Just make sure there's no airflow in a room. And a compass, which will detect magnetic field changes. Heather, you gonna take this one?
There is a widespread idea among paranormal researchers that ghosts emit an electromagnetic field and that their presence can thus be detected by EMF meters. A related idea is that ghosts may disturb the existence of background geomagnetic field when they are present. Either way, unexplained changes in EMF meter readings are often taken as a sign of ghostly or paranormal activity.
Linda, can you take this one for me?
Sure. What is a ghost made of? I'm trying to see because I've got pictures there. It is a stationary electric field emanating from an object's surface in which has electric charges on it. These electric charges arise from atoms on the surface, gaining or losing electrons. An electric charge produces an electric field which can affect the surrounding environment. It has been claimed that ghosts can produce static electric field changes. This is similar to the idea that ghosts produce magnetic field changes. EMF, electromagnetic field, an invisible field of electromagnetic radiation of energetic particles that move as radio waves, infrared vision light, UV light, gamma radiation. EMFs are generated by moving electric charges that propagate outward from any object carrying an electric current. This electric field is produced by stationary charges and the magnetic field by moving charges or current.
Now that may seem a bit intense and detailed, but this is the theories behind why we use EMF meters and static electricity meters. When you get down to the science of what we're actually trying to detect is environmental changes, with static electricity and EMF being two of the major ones that people say ghostly phenomenon produce. Now we'll get into what we use today. This is the back of my team's van as we're getting packed up. A little different than Harry Price's kit. Okay, we can all just jump in, but these are something that every paranormal investigator should have, is a digital recorder. And with the digital recorder, you're going to need some type of audio system to program to listen and cut out the EVPs. I use Audacity, but there are different versions. I don't know what the rest of you use. But
I use Audacity.
You do?
Audacity as well.
It's
Yeah,
free.
Audacity is the one I use.
Why not? It's free. I mean, and it's great. The next is something that most teams have, is a DVR system, which you put on right away when you get to a location, and it records the entire investigation. But a word of advice is, before you get your DVR system set up, go in with a camera running, because something could happen before you get all this stuff hooked up, which takes a while to run all the wires to these cameras. So go into a location with the camera on.
A few things on the digital recorder. I saw the question posed in one of the groups that I am in just recently, that somebody was utilizing an Olympus recorder. They had recorded some, really cool, EVP, and they wanted to get it to their computer. It was at that point that they realized that it did not have a USB interface. There was no way for them to get it from the PC or from the recorder to the PC in a normal manner. There are connector cables where you can kind of MacGyver some audio line out and play it through that. Definitely not a preferred method. So make sure any digital audio recorder that you get, if you want to be able to review your data from a computer, make sure it has a USB type of micro USB connector. Another big thing is really do your research when you are looking at purchasing a audio recorder. Not all are made equally. There are a lot that will only record when it picks up people talking. There are some that are only going to specifically record the frequency that human voices operate within, if you will. And I don't know about you guys, but a lot of times with EVPs, I have found that they're either below or above the human frequency of hearing. And so if you have an audio recorder that is only picking up the frequency that humans speak in and nothing below and nothing above, you're going to be potentially missing out on a lot of anomalous behavior. So make sure you look at something that gets a nice wide range, if that's what your research is looking for. Get something that dips a little bit lower than what we talk, and then likewise a little bit higher.
And I believe it's best to record in MP3 or WAV. I can't, but it's you definitely want to check and learn what the human voice speech hertz is and what an EVP range hertz is. I will try to post that on the site to give you a little rundown of what our ears can hear, what our voice, how low it can get, how high it can get, and then why EVPs are caught below the human hearing range and the voice range.
And always cut them on before you go into your location, whether
Yes.
it's If it's a private residence, make sure you have, the homeowner's blessings first before you start recording, obviously. So try to call ahead and make sure that they know you're going to be doing this. And likewise for any historic site or anywhere that you're just publicly investigating. The majority of the times that I've seen EVPs are either right when you walk into the location because something is startled that you're there, or just during a normal conversation, kind of like what we're doing right now.
And if you ever have a problem like Steve said with no port or something weird going on with your recorder, I have played it directly from the recorder to my computer just with the speaker, just so I wouldn't lose it. I mean, it's not great, but if there's something there, at least you'll have it. The next thing we all need are video cameras, day vision and IR night vision. And everybody has their preference of what kind of cameras they want. And if you plan on making videos for YouTube, that kind of thing, 4K is the best. It produces the best quality. I think things are going up to 6K now, but that's out of my price range. But these are some of my cameras and IR lights. This is Mike on our team. He has a very, very expensive video equipment because he has a video production company. But these are some IR lights that will light up a whole forest that I have. I'm not sure what everybody else uses with IR or your cameras, but the range between cameras, it's as much money as you want to spend, but make sure you get a video camera with day and night vision.
If you can afford it. I know, and a big thing, just as a reminder, as we're going through a lot of these pieces of equipment, we are coming to you as folks that have been in the field for a little bit of time. I myself have been in it over a decade. And so this, to be clear, is a hobby. It is a passion. It's handled professionally, but it is a hobby. And when I say that, I mean, you're going to be putting money into this. Don't expect anything out, because then you're not doing it for the right reasons. All right. But, don't go out and start immediately purchasing things. I have seen so many people that have reached out to me and want to know what equipment they need to buy so they can start investigating. Don't let all of this that we're talking about deter you from just getting out there and experiencing and investigating. I know, like Philip had said, he's got somebody on his team that is a professional photographer and has this equipment. I myself have purchased, a 4K night vision camera. And I've got a deadlight, which is one of my favorite IR lighting rigs. That doesn't mean you need that to investigate, though. So, if you just have a regular camera, go for it. If you've got, something, the biggest thing here is when you are investigating, try to record what you're doing to the best of your ability. If that means just audio, then it's just audio. If that means down the road, you can get a video camera that you need to utilize a flashlight or, on board or off board, and you kind of have to light the room up. Guess what? You're still going to get activity. When you finally, find out, I really want to do this, I want to get into this, dive into one of these cameras. Either night vision, full spectrum if you want to go the UV route. I've seen some really cool things on the ultraviolet side. That is extremely expensive, and so I have not invested in that. IR is always the safer, cheaper alternative to night vision. That's where a lot of the technology, especially in the paranormal field, lies today. And that's where you're probably going to get your best bang for your buck.
Just briefly, my first camcorder was pre-owned on eBay. And these cameras here are dash cams that I converted into IR for $28. So there are ways around buying expensive equipment. These IR lights are fantastic. They are about $19 on Amazon. And I just rigged it all up, and then I put a battery pack with it, and I have a great portable battery operated DVR system. So you do not have to spend a lot of money. You just have to be very creative. And sometimes it doesn't look fantastic, but it gets the job done.
Oh, I definitely, agree. My first IR cameras, I grabbed some of those off-brand GoPros, and I was able to kind of hack them so that they were filming in infrared. Uh, $15 later, and I was good to go. I mean, it wasn't the most amazing things in the world, but it worked. It got what I needed, done. I was able to get out there and investigate. Um, Another thing, don't necessarily look at like if it's like ghost equipment, like paranormal investigator equipment. Um, that typically that just means that there's an added fee or price tacked on to the top of it. Like Philip said, you can modify a lot of things by looking up on YouTube, or just finding used equipment. A lot of my equipment's used as well. So.
And I have gotten some of the best Class A EVPs on these $28 cameras than I have on my expensive digital recorder. So if the spirit wants to speak, it's going to speak.
Sure.
Now here is the good old K2 meter.
Me too.
Anybody want to take this one?
I would just like to say, if you're using a K2, make sure your phone's on airplane mode, because anybody near it with a phone is going to start activity. That's something to always remember.
Yeah, I posted on the page today some information about the K2. If you want to go check it out, it's really good information. These can be useful. You just have to know how to use it. Can be activated by cell phones, Wi-Fi signals, key fobs, and walkie-talkies.
Literally all of the things.
Now, what I have done, I bought this RF radio frequency meter. It was under $20. It's on Amazon. And if you pair these side by side, this will debunk this. If this is going off, it's a radio signal, it is a Wi-Fi signal, it is something man-made. If this one's lighting up and this one is not, it's a possible paranormal activity, because this will pick up anything man-made. And like I said, these are like $20 on Amazon. Now, this is a good piece of equipment to have whenever you can get one. I bought my first one used, and it was not the deluxe model by any means. But this is the fully loaded Mel meter, and the last time I looked at the price, it was around $275. I don't know if they've changed or not. But this is a multi-functioning piece of equipment. It has EMF, it has ambient temperature, and this is the thermometer right here. And this comes off, so don't ever lose this thing, or you'll have to buy another one. But you can buy others. This has an antenna that you raise, and it creates a REM pod effect. So if anything touches the antenna, these lights will light up. Of course, this one, the deluxe one, has shadow detector, red, laser, everything. But to get a basic one as an EMF meter and a temperature gauge, they work great. This is great to do your baseline readings with whenever you do an investigation.
I think the biggest difference between something like this, a Mel meter, tri-field, and I haven't looked at the PowerPoint, I apologize, but I'm hoping you have something about the what is it? The not the REM pod, the Pro Plus. I can't remember the name, but what was that?
EDI?
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Coming up.
Cool. So the nice thing about a Mel meter, is it's great for, like you said, baseline readings. You can, walk around a house. We utilize these a lot in first time walking into locations, as well as client locations, for baseline readings. They are very mobile. It's easy to get a reading. It's quick to get a reading. The nice thing about these is it does show you in milligauss on the screen, so it gives you an actual representation, as opposed to it's reading red. And I'm like, well, that doesn't give me a numerical value. The K2 still has its place in some instances, but something like a Mel meter works out really well when you're trying to manually, when you're moving around and you're actively watching and reviewing the data that is coming through. If you're, kind of stepping up a notch, a tri-field or an EDI, which I think we're going to be getting to, where you can actually collect that data and historically look back, that is going to be something very useful if that's the type of research you're doing.
And just to point out, this will be backlit. So this does light up so you can see it in the dark. Just on a scientific little note, this is a single access EMF detector. It will only detect energy coming from one direction. So when you're doing baselines, you need to move this very slowly and in a pattern, because it will only pick up from one direction. I have a professional EMF meter that electricians and use, and it's a 3-axis EMF meter, which will pick it up from different directions. So you could follow if something paranormal is going on in the room, it'll follow it around. But you don't need one. I mean, they're not inexpensive, but when you buy them pre-owned, you can get a great deal. EDI, who wants to go over EDI?
I like EDI, but if somebody else wants to, they can.
Go for it, Steve.
Okay, so EDI is kind of one of the newcomers to the paranormal field in terms of utilization. They haven't been out too terribly long, but they are phenomenal because it does allow folks to finally get into the data logging realm. Prior, there were teams utilizing this. One of the teams that I worked with and still do work with perform data logging and analysis for a lot of that environmental data, but it was extremely expensive, hundreds if not thousands of dollars, and the software that was that they utilized to actually review that data also costed a license and a yearly fee and all that. EDI has simplified a lot of this, which is why this is so great. So this is a kind of an all-in-one kit here. The EDI and the EDI Plus, which is I think most folks have, has a geophone on it, which is that vibration piece at the bottom. It does pick up EMF, which is the milligauss. So the nice thing about this, before I get too in depth, is it does have that screen there in the middle. And you can actually flip through the display of what you're looking at. So instead of the milligauss just saying, okay, the light is up to 7.5 or 10 plus, what does that mean? You can actually flip through the display and see what that means. Same with vibration. You're able to see what that numerical value is. It's going to be showing you ambient temperature, as well as if it goes, up, if it rises, if it lowers. It's going to pick up air pressure if that rises, if that lowers. I actually had mine running the other day, and I could see where the air pressure just quickly dropped, and I was able to see that a storm was coming in. And a few minutes later, a storm hit, and I thought that was just the coolest thing. It's also picking up humidity. And so all of this combined, and this is where a lot of people, I see so many people walking around with this thing in their hands, walking around looking at, don't do that. You need to stop doing that. Put that thing down and let it do its job. The EDI Plus is a data logger. That is the purpose of it. It is for logging data. And so it can't do that if you're picking it up and walking around with it, treating it like a Mel meter, treating it like a K2. Its purpose is to be set down, let it stabilize, let it, kind of get a baseline, and then it's going to do its job. And every, minute, every second, it's taking a recording of all of these environmental data points, and then dumping it into a CSV. When you get home, and as a side note, when you purchase one of these, you do need to get a separate SD card for this. They take very specific SD cards, so don't just go grab one. Make sure you research it. I can't remember which one it is right now, but you need that to actually look at this data. You can run this thing all you want, but without an SD card, it's not gonna capture any of that. When you get home, you're gonna dump it into the graph, and you can actually see the graph in the background of that picture where it shows the geophone, EMF, pressure, humidity. And this is a phenomenal tool for correlating paranormal or anomalous activity with what's occurring in the environment around you at that time. There are a lot of studies and a lot of research being done by teams that I work closely with that find that paranormal experiences tend to be localized. And I don't mean localized by an entire room. I mean localized by it's happening right here. And so if you have this EDI Plus, and I know it's a shot in the dark, but you have it in that right spot, you are able to see things like the pressure drop or the pressure rise or EMF spikes at the same time as pressure or humidity, air pressure. You're able to see that. And then if you partner that up with, an audio recording, video recording, you're able to see and show something anomalous that's occurring within your environmental data at the same time as a paranormal experience, whether it's an EVP, somebody sees something, hears something, anything like that. You're able to kind of show from a scientific model that this occurred.
Yeah, the graph will have it timestamped too. It doesn't show on this little picture, but it will have every occurrence timestamped, so you will see when it happened. Now here's a fun one that everybody loves, that's on all the TV shows. The SLS camera. I'm sure you've all seen them. We have one. It's fun to use. It makes for some really dramatic videos, but it's totally experimental. The camera will detect human shapes in absolute darkness or in full light. What it's doing, it's emitting an IR pattern of dots. So if anything comes into that pattern, the program that's programmed into the Kinect system has a skeletal mapping program. So it will translate those disruptions in the dots into a stick figure. It uses a tablet, is what you're going to watch everything on. But this will map a house plant as a person. It will map a chair as someone sitting in a chair, because it's seeing those legs and those arms, and it's programmed to turn it into a stick figure shaped as a human. And it doesn't really know that's a chair. I see a lot on these TV shows where they're like, oh, wow, it's sitting in the chair, sitting in the chair. It's like, well, I'm sorry, that is the chair. My opinion. I read something recently. If you want to use these, the best thing to do is place it facing a blank wall with 6 feet in between the SLS and the wall, with nothing in between.
Socially distancing from the wall.
Yes, which I'm getting really tired of. Dogs are tired of me. So if anything passes between the SLS and that wall within 6 feet, and you see a skeletal figure, you probably got a ghost, because there's no reason it should be mapping blank air. Do any of y'all use these?
Sorry, go ahead, Linda.
We have them. We don't tend to use them a lot for that reason, is they map anything and everything. So.
Yeah, we used it once, but it picked up shadows and reflections off of windows and walls as well.
Yes.
And that's why this is considered an experimental piece of equipment. And I can't stress that enough, because there are so many folks that will build this or purchase this. And I say build because it's super easy to make one of these guys, but they will carry these things around, swing them around the room, and it's just the software's purpose. The whole purpose of the Kinect software is to map in what looks like a human, so that you can play video games. That's the whole purpose of it. That's why it says Xbox on there. So just be careful when you're utilizing something like this. Like Philip said, set it down somewhere. Let it get a baseline of the room. Make sure nobody's walking in front of it. Make sure that it's not pointed towards furniture, chairs, coat racks, those sorts of things, because it's going to pick that up as a person. That is the intent of the software. As a side note, if you did want to try investigating with one of these, but you're not quite sure, and this goes back to save your money until you know what you want, build one yourself. This is incredibly easy to build. If you've got an Xbox 360 or an Xbox One with the Kinect sitting around, you can unplug it. It's got USB ports already, so plug it into your computer. If you've got Windows, download. There's a Kinect Windows SDK is what it's called, Windows Software Developer Kit. And you can download that. It will interface with the Kinect camera, and you can have the same exact thing that you see in the bottom, or actually in the middle picture there, without spending a dime. It's not mobile. It's not meant to be really anyways. When these carry around ones are meant to be, pick it up, go to a spot, sit it down. Um,
Yeah, we
so
put ours
give
on
it
a
a shot.
tripod because this handle right here has the 1/4 inch screw mount to it. So if when we do use it, we'll put it on the tripod and place it in one direction. But the first time we tried it, we were at Brushy Mountain and we placed it towards the blank wall, nothing in between. And very important, hit the record button because we ran the whole thing and forgot to hit the record button. So there is a record button on the program, and if you don't hit it, you're not going to save the video. Just a little, yeah. REM pod. Who would like to take that?
I'll take it. It's
Okay.
one of my favorite pieces.
All right.
So it has a an antenna that creates a static field around it, and anything that comes in contact or breaks that static field, you're going to get a noise or the lights will light up. It also does temperature. The pitch is higher, I think, for the temperature that rises and lower when it drops. It is a good piece of equipment. We've had a lot of success with it. You can use it to ask direct questions and try to get a response on these. But then again, be careful where you put it. It will pick up stuff. If anything's near it, it will be affected by currents and all that. So again, give it a good space away from anything that you think might be there. If you've done a good base reading, you know where to put the thing. If people walk by it, it doesn't generally go off, but sometimes it will, especially if they bump it or come close to it. The lights are color coded and they are supposed to light up with intensity. You might get one light, you might get two lights, just like the K2 meter. You might get all four lights if it's really going nuts. It does help with changes in the environment if you pay attention to it. And if you have other equipment like the EDI, you can gauge this along with that. Are they doing the same thing? Are they reading the same thing? And then you know exactly what's happening, what isn't.
And I see a lot of people, they put these on the floor. I haven't read anywhere where all the ghosts are on the floor, but I'd like to raise it up off the floor. Well, first of all, if you step on it in the dark, you've wasted almost $200. But as far as the temperature change, I have begun to just turn it off because it's quite annoying. Because if you're in a residential location and the furnace comes on, it's going to start beeping. If the furnace goes off, it's going to start beeping again. If the air conditioner comes on, it's going to start beeping. If it goes off, so it is detecting temperature changes, and it can drive you nuts.
Yeah, we usually keep ours off. I don't, it makes me nuts too. And what you said about the floor, I never put it on the floor. I put it on a table, on a chair,
Yes.
somewhere up off the ground.
I can't remember. Do they still make the original without the temperature gauge? I don't know. I mean, I'm if you're wanting to buy one, you really don't have to spend the money and get the temperature one because you're going to probably turn it off because it will drive you insane during investigation.
I think the other thing is if you are actually trying to look at your data from a temperature standpoint, you probably want something like an EDI Plus that you can record the data. With these sorts of things, they are useful tools, and I actually like the REM pod, and I'll tell you why. But for a temperature kind of side of things, that temperature is going to change as soon as you walk into the room. You are changing the temperature with your body heat. The more people that walk in, that leave, it is changing the whole gradient of the room from a temperature perspective. And so you're going to see it raise slightly and then drop back down. And it's just going to keep kind of lowering until it gets back to the way that the room was before you entered. So the temperature might not be as useful. The thing I do like about the REM pods is the science behind it is very sound. The antenna is extremely important. So if you get one of these and the antenna breaks, you're probably not going to have a good time. The way that that antenna works is it's almost essentially, if you guys know what an electromagnetic field itself looks like, it's pretty equivalent to what a magnetic north and south pole look like if you have a magnet where they kind of come out from the top and meet back around at the bottom. And so anything that enters that field, if that field is broken or changed or altered in any way, that's where you're going to have the lights, that's where you're going to have the sounds. And so there shouldn't theoretically be anything entering that field that's going to be making that consistent of a change that's going to set these devices off. Obviously, with these, you do want to set them kind of, I guess, on their own a little bit, so that anything else that's around them is not something that's going to be throwing off electricity. So grounded equipment. Again, if you have a cell phone, if you've got a walkie-talkie, make sure that if you're utilizing that, even if you're not and you haven't put your phone into airplane mode, it's still going to be, sending out messages, checking to see if there's any new data for you for your Facebook, Twitter, your email, anything from your cell provider. You don't even need to have all that stuff. There's data consistently going from your phone back and forth. So make sure you have all of those things silenced when you're utilizing something like this, and you get some really cool results.
Also, these are very expensive. These are well made, but this is a brand, like Mercedes. But there are other people in the paranormal field who make a version of this. I'm not here to push products, but I like Paratronics. He makes some really good versions of expensive things. They're called Red Pods. I have a few of those because these are quite pricey. So, if you are on a budget, there are other things out there. And just a quick note, you can attach a thin piece of copper wire to this antenna and make a big continuous circle with the copper, and you will have an EMF field if something passes over it. Just a little fun thing you can do. Next, the FLIR camera. Anybody want to take it? I can. It's a thermal imaging camera. It shows hot and cold images. And you can see in the center picture where I have it aimed at those eyes that kind of seem to be glowing in the dark. It's 76 degrees when the rest of the room was about 90 degrees. That was at a really interesting house. FLIR cameras are extremely expensive, but you can buy the cell phone attachments. There is an Android one and an iPhone version. And I made this one myself. I bought an iPad mini, attached the FLIR adapter to it, and then put it on a handheld mount and carried around. And it makes it's a FLIR camera. It's just not all in one. It's great. And you can have it charging while you're using it with the USB cord. But these are a lot of fun. And there's some really interesting things you can find evidence-wise with these cameras. Does anybody use FLIRs?
We utilize, go ahead, Linda.
I have one, and I did the same as you. I confiscated my husband's old 6 Plus iPhone, put the attachment on it, and put it on a stand to carry it around with me.
Yep. So what's the FLIR? The FLIR camera is small. The one that's like $1,400, or it's like crazy. I think I paid about $200 for the FLIR cell phone adapter.
Right. Somebody on my team has the actual FLIR camera, and the one that he has, he paid about $1,500 for it.
Yeah, and they're small. Where if you use something like this, I have a big, iPad screen.
Right.
Yeah, we utilize both. The big thing to remember is if you are going to be utilizing the adapter for an Android or iPhone, is make sure you keep an eye on the battery life of both devices. I have seen some very unfortunate mishaps where either the phone died or the FLIR camera, the attachment itself, died. And if they were recording data, it does not save it. It won't save it even midway through. And so all of that from the entire, the whatever they filmed was completely lost. So make sure you're paying attention to those sort of things when you're walking around with these devices. I don't know if the FLIR handhelds, the actual devices themselves, have that issue. I haven't seen them die yet, but I can say from experience, make sure you keep your equipment charged for the adapters.
Absolutely. This is something that we use that's a lot of fun. They're periscopes, tribolic meters, basically static detectors. These are made by Paranologies. They're around $130. I've, of course, bought mine pre-owned because I like to save a few dollars. But this will show static electricity moving that will light up in the direction that they're moving. I like to place them down a hallway and see if it will detect a static field. Or you can put these several in one room, and if you are having communication with a spirit, you can point to them and have them light them up. We've had that happen before. But these are fun things that light up. Do any of you use any of the periscopes?
We have about 8 of them.
Yeah.
And I was actually with Jeremy, who makes these, and we were investigating, and he put like 10 down a hallway. And it was really fascinating. You could actually follow one periscope after the other as the energy moved down that hallway. It was very interesting. So, yeah.
And I think another point that Linda hit on is set them down.
Yes.
These utilize and are measuring static electricity. The way that they light up is it's looking for the direction of the electricity. Set them down, because you yourself will generate static electricity if you are walking on a carpet. If you are just moving and you're wearing a shirt, with shoes on, without shoes, it does not matter. Set them down, because you can create static electricity. If you shake these things, they will go off. And so it's another one of those things, along with the EVI, set them down, let them stabilize, give them a couple minutes before you start to try to utilize it or suggest that anything that is coming across is paranormal in nature. Let them get a baseline first.
And that's a good point, Steve, because whenever you do set them down, they do go off and they need a minute to stabilize. People always jump in and say, "Oh, it's going off, it's going off." Well,
I just off already.
Put it down, give it a minute,
If you put them on a bed, just make sure that the bedspread isn't synthetic, because if someone's sitting on the bed and you're watching it and they move around, it can create static electricity from the bedding. So just a little note on that. Laser grids. This is the one that we use. It is the 360 laser grid. This is an infrared light laser. It isn't like the little laser pins that you see. This one will map out a whole room. Not so much detecting spirit movement, but it's good to see if objects move a lot of times, because there's all kinds of theories on if a spirit can actually refract the light from laser grids. That's a whole.
If they have mass, essentially, then it would alter the grid in some form or fashion.
But they're also kind of pretty. But any of you, the laser pins that you see all over the place for like $20, those eat up batteries like crazy, because there's no heat outlet built into those little things. So they get really hot and the batteries burn up fast. And I see people holding them all the time on investigations. Well, great. I mean, set it down. Your movement alone is going to drive you nuts when you're looking at it in video. You're not going to know if something's actually going through it or if it's your movement. But do any of you use lasers?
I just got mine and we used it Saturday for the first time. I got the laser grid.
Yeah.
The laser pen, we did run into that same situation that you just explained. A cheap alternative to that is, have you seen those Christmas lights that they put on your house?
Yes.
Well, we actually throw those in a couple times. If you're lucky enough to have electricity, you can plug those in. They'll do a greater distance than the laser pen and do the same job without burning up a bunch of batteries.
Another thing is if you do have a laser pen already, like I have a laser pen already. It came with a attachment that has the grid diffraction. So already does what I needed to do, except if you're holding it with your hand, it is highly unreliable because our hands, no matter what, they move. We vibrate in a certain frequency. So a cheap way to do this, if you have one of these already, is if you get like a clip or something like that, like if you were going to close a bag of chips, you can use that to press the button down. That will hold it in, and you can utilize that. The other way, if you want to actually make it look, not jerry-rigged, get a tiny tripod. I bought a bunch at the dollar store one time when I found them. If you have access to a 3D printer, or if you just go online and look up, something that's going to hold a laser pointer, I actually printed this little guy off myself. And so if you look through here, it's hard to see, but there is a small indentation on the inside of it that I actually pushed the button down. I super glued a screw or a nut to the bottom so that I can screw this onto a stand. And literally all you do is you push this in, you turn it slightly. And if I had a battery in this guy, it would shoot off. And then from here, it's stationary. I don't need to worry about it moving, which is key for a lot of equipment like this, especially light, equipment for utilizing light. You don't want it to move. You don't want it to change, because then you don't have a frame of reference for your gradient any longer.
Motion sensors. This is the one that I use. This is by Paratronics. It is a 360 motion pod. It has 4 sensors on it, which goes north, south, east, and west. It has a 40-foot perimeter. It will pick up anything within 40 feet, and it changes colors in the direction that it's picking up movement, and it's very loud. I love this thing. There's also motion sensors you can get really inexpensively at Harbor Freight. If you put this in a room and close the door and a motion sensor goes off, there's got to be something there that's making it go off, because these don't really react to like Wi-Fi signals or that kind of thing like a static detector does. Do you guys use motion detectors? You do, Linda?
Yeah, but we have the cheap ones from Harbor Freight.
Yeah, I've got a box of those, and I like to put those down a hallway also, line those up. And if anything,
we utilize the cheap ones as well. And again, like, this is a great example that there is paranormal equipment specifically around this. So if you want something concise, and you're looking at saving, more so of time and space in your kit, your arsenal, something like this would be great to go for. If you're looking to save money, kind of a do-it-yourself kind of individual, going to somewhere like Home Depot, Harbor Freight, something like that, and grabbing the same ones that you would utilize for opening and closing a door. Some, super simple things, that works just as well. They're also super useful to set up in another room. Tell one of your investigators to go in there and scare the living daylights out of them. So just a side note, folks.
Yeah, I think this one's priced around 80, I believe. This is a trigger object sensor. So many paranormal investigators use trigger objects, but if you're not watching the trigger object, how do you know if something's going for it? This is one that I got from Ghost Tech. Vortex Ghost Gear. I'm sorry, he made it for me. They're around $100, but it needs to be something metal that it's attached to. You can take, let's say you want to use a cigar as a trigger object, take a little round metal plate or pan or something like a aluminum foil pan, just clip this to the edge of it and then put your trigger object in it. This is a bear that I made, and I just wove really thin copper wire all through it. So anywhere you touch the bear, it will light up the trigger object sensor. But trigger objects are a big thing. A lot of times in historical places, in prisons. I think at Brushy Mountain, I took some Playboy magazines, some cards and things, and put them on the trigger object pad, and and some whiskey. And you'd be surprised the thing they will go for these trigger objects. Do you use anything like this? Heather?
Yeah, sorry, I was unmuting. We've actually, my son's idea was we do investigations where a young boy is known to be at, and we've brought my son's dinosaurs with.
Oh, yeah.
To see if they've moved, and we haven't had luck yet, but we're still hoping.
But if you don't want to do this, like I said, you can take your REM pod antenna, attach a copper thin wire to it, take a baby doll, wrap it with thin copper wire like I did the teddy bear, and connect those, and you'll have a trigger object sensor. I mean, there's things you can do to save money that will work fantastic.
Do we have a slide to go into like more in terms of trigger objects?
I don't have a trigger object one, no.
Okay. So in terms of this, you know, when you're thinking about utilizing trigger objects, which are a phenomenal idea on your investigation, try to think outside of the box. You know, do things like Philip said, where you're bringing things and items and objects that are specific to the environment. For example, if he took that teddy bear and went to a Civil War battlefield, you might not get a whole lot with that. The other thing is really expand your approach here. You know, objects are great, but what about everything else? And I say this, I think there was another stream where I talked about a good friend of mine, John Sable, and he calls himself a ghost excavator. One of the really cool things that he does that I love is he peels back layers of history almost like it's an onion. And so it's more of, you know, not just the objects play a huge part, but these other senses as well. So the smells, if that means bringing in a candle that is a specific scent, or for example, cooking a meal from that time period, sounds, bringing in music, sights. So not going into a place wearing something like this, you know, but something that would have been more period appropriate. Doesn't say paranormal investigator or anything like that. You're not wearing your Nike shoes or, you know, your whatever. Something that is more appropriate that spirits there might recognize and feel comfortable interacting with. Same goes with trigger objects. So when you're thinking about utilizing things like this, make sure you're getting, you know, you're giving it your all, and think outside the box. What else can you do to make something comfortable in order to either communicate or want to you know, interact with this object?
I got a great EVP a couple years ago. I was in a restaurant that had been a hardware store, and they have a ghost named Bob, but Bob was apparently murdered and buried in the basement. But I left a cigar for him, and I came back down to check on the cameras, and I just walked in and said, "Hi, it's your friend Philip. I was just checking, and did you smoke your cigar yet?" And the EVP said, "No." It's like, stupid. How am I going to smoke the cigar? I'm a ghost.
Good point. We were at an old TB hospital, and we were getting no activity at all. And the third floor was a geriatric floor. And so we took a cribbage board up there, and two of the team members started playing cribbage, and it just took off. It was like something they could relate to, and it took off, the activity.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing where, you know, a lot of people in today's age, and that's why I liked this this particular topic of looking at some of the past technologies and, you know, kind of techniques for investigating, bringing them into present day, because a lot of what, you know, back then, depending on the time period and the era that you're investigating, they're not going to know what a camera is or a flashlight or any of this sort of stuff. And so when you think about it, you're walking into somebody's environment, somebody's home, somebody's living room. You're setting down a bunch of unknown things. They're hearing, all these noises, lights, sounds, all these people talking in a dialect that they don't quite understand. It's familiar yet different. Put yourself in those sorts of, shoes, and then you kind of have a better idea of how you can create a comfortable and trusting environment to interact. And so, like you said, playing cribbage, we did an investigation where we were in a hospital, and it was an insane asylum, and we were in the drunk tank. And we knew that at the period that this hospital was operating, and this drunk tank was in use, Johnny Cash was massive at that time. And so we went in there and we played a few Johnny Cash songs. And the amount of activity that spun off after that was phenomenal. But I don't think that if we would have just walked in there and just asked, "What's your name? Why are you here? How did you die?" Yeah, I don't even want to talk to you about that. You know what I mean? Like, if somebody walked up to me and said, "What's your name?" I'd be like, "I don't know, you guy." So think about that when you're utilizing these trigger objects and setting environments.
Yeah, we like in a Civil War area, playing taps usually really gets some good activity going. So this is the Paranormal Puck 2. Did any of you use the Paranormal Puck?
I have one.
I have team members that have them. I myself don't have one.
This is very similar in what it does to the EDI, but where the EDI has everything on it, this sends everything to a tablet or your computer screen. So you can observe it from a different room even. You just set the little puck down. It's like a big giant pucky huck, and you turn on your tablet that you've downloaded the corresponding program to, and they link up. And it will detect change in temperatures. Oh, and it'll graph and log everything also, so you have all your information. It will even register ambient light level changes, say if like the room suddenly gets darker. I mean, I've been on investigations where the room suddenly gets darker or lighter for some reason. It will show you changes in barometric pressure, motion. So it does a lot, but like the EDI, this one's different. It will direct it to an external source. So you can just go in, set this down somewhere, leave it, and turn on your computer and watch it. Linda, do you use it a lot?
We do. And a good point to note is that a lot of people, if they watch the TV shows and stuff, they don't realize it does all this. Because if you watch Ghost Adventures, he basically uses it like an Ovilus. And that's what they focus on, is the verbal aspect. I've never seen them comment on all of these things. So it's important to know that it does do all those things, and will graph them out on your iPad or your phone or whatever you're using.
That's one reason I wanted to do this equipment presentation, because I've watched some of the shows and they will be holding a piece of equipment and call it something completely different than what it is, or they won't be using them correctly, like the tri-field meter, what we're getting ready to show. There's one particular show where he walks around carrying the tri-field meter. It just drives me nuts. So hopefully you're getting some good information from us on how to use these things, because they will work for you if you use them properly.
The same thing with the puck 2. Set it down. Don't be running around crazy with this, because it is going to change, the light level. It's going to change barometric pressure. The other nice thing that I like about these is they're from Digital Dowsing. So if you guys are familiar with the Ovilus, they essentially took a lot of these kinds of things, turned them into applications so that you can utilize your phone. A lot of people hate utilizing phones for investigating. I do in some aspects, and I think it really depends on the application that you're utilizing it for. The nice thing about your cell phone is it does do a lot of these things already on the phone itself. It has a lot of these sensors built in. It has a gyroscope. It has something that detects light level. It has a lot of those things that, if you're familiar with ITC and some of that data and that realm of investigating, digital dowsing does do that, where they're utilizing the sensors that are already on your phone as a kind of a mobile lab for investigating the paranormal. So I do like this company.
Yeah, I think doesn't he have the contract with Ghost Adventures to make all their equipment? I think that's digital dowsing.
It
I
is.
wouldn't be surprised.
That's Phil Chapel, and he does.
But don't think about ordering any of that. You can't afford it.
This is not cheap either.
No. Phonopod. This is by Paranologies. This is something we use. It's a very, very, very sensitive listening device. You put the unit down in a room and you can go out, sit in your car, put the headphones on, and it will pick up a flea burping. I mean, you will hear everything crystal clear with this. So you can listen for any kind of disembodied voices. It says EVPs, but to me, EVPs aren't audible to the human ear hearing. So, but some people say EVPs are anything electronic voice related. But this is something we like to use. Whenever you use any type of listening devices, amplifiers?
Mhm.
I have the ReVP from Paranologies.
Yes.
All that does is, I love it. All it does is eliminate hours of listening to nothing, because it has a quick burst, a 75-second burst, and you can play it back immediately. We have gotten some good responses on it. And what I like about this guy is it's a lifelong guarantee. If you step on it in the dark, you can
Yes.
mail it back and he will fix it and send it back to you.
So our team doesn't use phonopods. We do a very similar setup, however. So if you guys are, if you already have something like a Zoom H1 or an H4, for example, one of the things that we have done is they actually have an audio out. So you can plug in, there's adapters where it goes from the auxiliary plug for, if you were to plug in your headphones, you can actually convert that into a Ethernet cable. And so you can actually bring that all the way, run it back wherever you want. So like you said, Philip, we've ran it from the third floor of a building all the way down the stairwell outside to a tent.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, we convert it back into, from the Ethernet cable, we have another converter that turns it back into just a regular headset jack, and then hook it into a speaker.
Now, everyone what the H1Ns and all those are, because they don't know. Those are digital recorders, right?
Yes. So Zoom makes a really nice line, and it's not the only one that does that. I can't remember the other sets of recorders, but if you do start getting into your audio recording and you're looking at very specific things, omnidirectional like this, or bidirectional, anything like that, Zoom makes a really great line. I've got an H1, an H4. I know somebody on my team has an H4N, and they're great lines. Great products. The nice thing is not all recorders are created equal. Just like we talked about earlier, some recorders don't allow you to do live audio listening. And so the ones that do, that's where you are able to do something like this setup, where you can run, if you don't have the money for something like this, but you have some Ethernet cable sitting around, and you can run it back, it's like I think we paid like maybe $1.75 for the adapters to Ethernet from the audio ports, and then we could sit wherever we wanted to and listen remotely. The nice thing is it's all saved on the device itself, so if we missed something, we can always go back and listen to it. And then, like Linda said, for the ReVP, you can do something similar that with just pressing record, running whatever. We do burst sessions in 3-minute to 5-minute increments, and then going back and listening to it while you're at the site. There's a lot of benefits to listening to your audio while you are on site. It is the difference between having an interrogation versus having a discussion.
But go to a different room when you're reviewing it where other devices you have running won't hear you reviewing it, because that can get confusing if you pick it up on other devices. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Um, Steve, do you think maybe you could do instructional videos on that? Because I'd like to really see that myself, on how you connect those things with the Ethernet cable.
Yeah, sure, we can do that.
That would
Yeah, I
be
would
great.
love it because I have a Zune and I would love to see how that was done. So I could
Me
do it.
too.
The other one that we use a lot that's extremely sensitive is Tascam. We have a Tascam recorders too.
Yep, that's the other line. Task cams can do it as well. That is exactly what I was thinking. I was like, there's two major ones that I really love. It's Zoom, and I couldn't remember the other one. It's Tascam.
Yeah.
Tascam makes a phenomenal line of audio recorders, and very similar to the Zoom. You can do live audio listening. So you'll see some people walking around with Tascams or Zooms, and they've got these bulky headphones on. Generally, they're listening to the audio live at the same time as they're doing an EVP session. They're just listening to hear if they hear anything. The nice thing about those recorders, like Philip said, they can hear an ant fart, and so from a mile away. So you can listen to that, and that little mumble conversation that you're like, was that an AVP? Did we hear something? You'll clearly be able to hear that upstairs, people are talking about their favorite flavor of Mountain Dew or something. So you'll be able to pick up all that.
We were upstairs and I could hear somebody downstairs drinking through a straw.
Oh, wow.
That's how amazing these things are.
And when
So
you wear them with the headphones, they will drive you nuts because you will hear every little thing. And I tend to take the headphones off and wrap them around my neck. It's not something I can get used to.
Yeah,
You,
stomach growl will sound like Godzilla getting ready to crush a city.
and they're both, like Steve said, they're both phenomenal. I tend to like the Zoom because it's more sleek and easier to carry around. Tascam are more like block, bulky.
Yeah.
Just a preference.
Now, Steve, you like the tri-field?
I do like the tri-field.
You want to go over this one?
Yeah, so the tri-field is really
picture, excuse me, this picture, there's a newer version of the tri-field that has a digital display. So if you're looking for this one and it doesn't look like this is the older version. There is a newer version with a digital readout on it. Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Nope, you're fine. So tri-fields are really nice. They are one of the more expensive, probably if not most expensive in terms of EMF meters that you can get. The nice thing is, again, these are not, and I personally always like to lean towards scientific equipment that is not purposefully made for ghost investigating, paranormal investigating. The tri-field meter is really made to be picking up the natural EMF kind of in the world around us. So it is going to detect a lot of those changes, but it does it in a very, very phenomenal and easy to use way. So like Philip said, there are two models. There is one that, like you see, that is probably one of the more common ones, where it does have just the bar there. There is the LED version. Both are great. Doesn't matter which one you get. If you can get your hands on one of these used, cheap, do it. Big thing is they're expensive. But another one of these devices where you can't go around flailing this thing around, running around with it, where you could with a Mel meter, you can kind of move around a little bit with more ease. The tri-field does need time to set. It is called tri-field because it is picking up 3 axes. This is one of your 3-axis EMF detectors. So it is picking up X, Y, and Z dimensions. So when you are utilizing this, it is good to use this in parallel with another detector like a Mel meter, something else that's reliable that you can utilize to determine which axes or which direction a EMF source is coming from. These are great because on top of that, they do have an out for data logging. So if you were to hook one of these guys up to a computer that can pull that data, you can do data logging with these guys however long they stay kind of alive. They do have a number of different things that they can pick up and how they do that, but highly reliable, great devices, more expensive than some of your other meters. If you can get one on the cheap, highly recommend it.
I got mine pre-owned on eBay.
There you
Uh,
go.
Another reason why you don't want to carry it is because our human bodies give off electricity. We're not man-made I mean, we're not artificial electricity. We're man-made electricity, and this thing will pick it up. That's why you do not walk around with it. Another thing this will pick up is lightning strikes from miles away, because lightning creates static electricity in the atmosphere. You may not even see the lightning. You may not even hear thunder. I pair this one, if the weather looks like there could be storms somewhere, I pair it with a lightning strike detector, which are really cheap on Amazon. But you put those side by side, and if it's lightning, you'll know it by the lightning strike detector, because it can pick up from miles and miles and miles away. But yeah, these are one of the more scientific pieces of equipment to use. But you can also use this as a conversation with the spirit, get them to get the dial to go up. You know, they can use this as a yes and no piece of equipment. Heather, do you use this one?
No, I haven't used that one yet.
It does have a sound to it. It's just not the bar that goes over it. It has a weird sound that you can hear when it's going off. It's almost like a ticking sound, but it definitely has a sound. You can hear it going off. On to the next one. We're winding down. Ghost boxes, spirit boxes, my favorite. There is nothing scientific about a spirit box. They are considered experimental, highly controversial, depending on who you talk to. It's not controversial with me because I've had conversations with people on them. A lot of teams, and the old team I was on, we would not put any responses from a spirit box down as evidence. We would list it under category of personal experiences. You've all seen these on television. The most common one is the PSB7, the one in the center. It scans radio stations really, really fast, where you should only have white noise or maybe just snippets of words. The one on the left is the new S box. It's by, is it Ghost Stop? I forgot to. For the money, it's the same price as a PSB7, but it also has a SD card in it, so you can record what you're doing. It has just has a lot of functions that the SB7 doesn't have. It's a lot louder. It has a pause button. And then on the right is my collection of Shack Hacks, Radio Shack radios that have been altered into spirit boxes. They're very collectible. I love them. I'm addicted to them. And that's my retirement plan that's in that case right there. I will sell those when I need to retire. But I love spirit boxes. You just have to have really good critical thinking when you're using one, and don't put too much into a little sound. I mean, it has to be crystal clear for me to use it as a response. Some people will hear the slightest sound and turn it into a word. But what are your guys' thoughts on them? Do you use spirit boxes?
Yeah, I actually have a love-hate relationship with those because I like that you get the instant communication with them. You don't have to wait to listen to your audio.
Yes.
But like you said, you do have to listen to it critically, because there are times where we'll be using it on an investigation and all four of us in the room will hear something different. And
Yes.
then it's kind of like, did we really hear something, or is it, audio matrixing? Similar, the brain wants to hear what it wants to hear type of thing. So it's like you said, very, some people think it's experimental, but it just depends on if you can get through all the static in there and actually pick up that clear conversation.
The static makes me absolutely crazy. It's kind of like the flashing lights that give somebody a seizure. I can only be in there for so long before I have to get out, and after listening to that. But we've had some very good conversations with them. We have the spirit box, and we also have the Poltercom by Paranologies, and I can tolerate that a lot better than I can do the white noise. But I definitely think it's something you have to train yourself to listen. You have to get used to it and practice it. because like Heather said, we've had people in a room where everybody's heard something different, you know.
Absolutely. And the big thing now is the Estes method, where one person is listening to the spirit box with headphones on and no one else can hear. And then that person cannot hear the questions that someone else is asking. And they will just say what they hear. I have some issues with that method. You know, to me, it could be pre-planned a lot of times. I almost want to hear the spirit box also. If there was some way the person with the headphones on, they could also let other people hear it, just to debunk it a little bit. That's just my thoughts. But we're going to get into next is something that kind of takes the static out, something that I like to play with. But
So real quick on that.
Yeah.
We use PSP7s in a number of different shack hacks and all that sort of stuff. I am definitely in the camp of it's experimental. The reason I think that is because it's essentially a broken radio. The whole idea of the PSP7 and some of the other ones is it is filtering through AM and or FM frequencies, and kind of doing it at a millisecond change. So it is fast. However, you've got to be careful when you're listening to some of these things, because it is picking up radio stations first and foremost. If you're using nothing else other than just the device itself, it is picking up radio stations. And so if you're at a location and you ask a question like, oh, where are we? And for example, I live right outside of Richmond, Virginia, and I hear Richmond. That's quite possible, because radio stations are like, serving the Richmond area. And so you can easily get that. The other issue I have with them, even though we still utilize them, is humans are phenomenal at picking up and creating patterns out of chaos. We are great at it. That is where kind of your matrixing comes into play when you're looking at photo review, photo analysis for some of the paranormal investigations. Same thing with audio. We're really good at creating pareidolia, where we might hear one thing, but our brains are already preset for something else. And so, like you said, the Estes method is phenomenal. Another thing is, if you are just using the PSP7 itself, get a Faraday cage or a Faraday bag for it. Highly recommend it. And like that setup in the middle, I will stick the speaker right on into the bag itself. I pulled mine out, homemade, and actually all this is I work in IT, and so these are the anti-static bags that computer parts are shipped in. So if you're getting a new motherboard, RAM, I would steal all of these. I cut them down to the size that I needed so that I could slip my PSP7 right on in, as well as the speaker. That way it removes all of the radio frequencies. It removes all of a majority of the FM stations, except for the super strong ones, and you kind of get an idea of which ones you're picking up as you flip through. The Estes method, something I absolutely love. I actually utilize that with the EchoVox application on an iPad. But we utilize the Estes method just because I personally, I like to remove that I guess that form of logic that we have as humans. The example I always give on investigations is, if you sit down and you ask the question, how old are you? What are you thinking for? What are you already listening for? You've already set your brain up to receive an answer in the form of a number. So it doesn't matter if something came over and said fork, because you just heard four. So utilizing something like the Estes method, where you separate the listener from the person asking questions, and this is actually the headset I use for it. It's noise canceling, so I can't hear anybody else. I close my eyes. Some people go crazy and they get some of the blind out things when you sleep. I just close my eyes because I trust myself, and I set a camera right on me so that I can't, I can prove that I didn't see anybody lip reading. Can't do it anyways, and I can't hear anybody. So if anybody asks a question, I'm just spouting out what I hear. And so the likelihood that I'm spouting out something that is an answer to the, a contextual answer to the question that they just asked is much less likely than if everybody is sitting there listening to it. There are adapters, like Philip, like you said, where you can output the audio to two sets of headphones or output it to a speaker somewhere else separately. But the idea is the person that's asking the questions should not be listening to the box. If it's a PSP7, if it's an Echovox, doesn't matter. But try to separate that. And like Philip said, if you guys are pre-populating your questions, you're doing it wrong. I have one of my investigators, whenever I go in for a session, she'll ask a few questions and then she'll ask something totally off the wall. Like a recent investigation we were on, we were interacting with something and then she says, "What's your favorite holiday? Christmas or Thanksgiving?" And my immediate response is Halloween. And it was funny because, when I'm going back and listening to it, it makes absolutely no sense in the context of the questions that she's asking, but she's doing that as I guess as a way to identify that whatever we're interacting with is intelligent. I'm not just spouting out answers that are, somewhat correlating with the questions. So just a few thoughts on that.
Using control questions, even in EVP sessions, is a good idea. We have a standard 14 EVP questions we ask, and about 3 of those are control questions, like where is Elvis? What kind of dog is this? And there's no dog there. Just something that totally off the wall to see what kind of answer you'll get. That kind of helps you debunk some of your other answers that you get. My favorite thing to do is to get curse words from spirit boxes. I've got
really good at that.
So many names that you would not hear on the airwaves on spirit boxes, because a lot of people think it's just a radio bleed through, but there are certain words you cannot say on the airwaves. There's not a list. I've looked for it, but anything considered.
You can say them one time. You can do just about anything once.
Yeah. But when they say it over and over again on the same night, I've got a great video of. I love ITC. I've been doing ITC for a long time, and you can see a lot of videos of mine on YouTube. But speaking of not liking the static, we're getting into our next slide. Spirit box enhancers. These are mine. Do any of you, well, the other term for them that I don't like to use is called portals. Do any of you use anything like this? You know what these are? These are amplifiers or speakers, and then there are certain types of guitar pedals added to them, usually a noise killer pedal, and then it will go into a reverb pedal. So you connect your spirit box into the first one, which is the noise reducer, and then you tune it out till you barely hear the static, and then you turn up the reverb, and so you're not listening to the static, but direct words will come through. I mean, the one in the center, I get amazing responses out of. You can see some of my videos. And to debunk the radio bleed through, there's a pedal called a flashback pedal that will scramble all the speech. So all you'll get is gibberish coming out of it, unless somehow the spirit can manipulate it into words we can understand, which they absolutely can, which is fascinating to me. But the one on the left has the 3 pedals. It has the noise killer, it has the flashback pedal, and then the reverb. That's one I take out into the wilderness with me because I can close it up. The one in the center is a little fancier one we use for videos. And then the one on the right is something that I make for people. If they get me the parts, I'll put it together for them or help them do it. But my friend Jesse Lisk, I helped him with one, and he's with the May Stringer House. He uses it a lot and gets some really good results out of it. But these devices are very expensive if you buy them pre-made. You can make these yourself. Like the one on the right is probably the most inexpensive one. I think the amplifier in the middle is maybe $20. I get a lot of pre-owned guitar pedals. But if you want to try something different and you don't like the static and you want to experiment, you can go this route and do one of these types of things. Any of you guys use something like this?
I've got somebody on the team that uses it. I personally don't. I'm probably the odd one out here. I'm kind of weird. I like to keep my audio as true to how I recorded it as possible. And when I go and do audio analysis, I am looking at the static alongside of everything else, because if I have a drop in static that wasn't there before, that might indicate, for me at least, that there is some sort of frequency being put off by a device or a appliance, for example, in the home or in a location. So I have somebody that uses it. I tend to just stick with the original, just a recorder, so that I can see the whole, I get the whole shebang when I'm reviewing.
There's a lot of controversy about tuning out all that static that could possibly be tuning out EVPs, direct voice, radio voice, things like that. But if you just really get tired of the static, this is one route. And I do a lot of ITC at home, not at investigations, but spirit communication. And that, for me, they work. It just depends on how you use it and what you use it for. But yeah, if you're going to buy one of these, you're going to pay a lot of money for it. If you make it yourself, I can always help you and tell you what to buy and make it for yourself and save a lot of money if you're interested. But that wraps up our presentation. Is there any questions coming from our viewers that we need to get into? I haven't been able to look.
I didn't see any questions come by. But if you do have questions, please put them in chat. And keep in mind, this is not like the full, this is the only things that you can utilize for investigating. There are so many different things that you can do for investigating. I mean, I know one team that is doing a project and a study on Geiger, utilizing Geiger counters to get a radiation level at locations. And when we set up those experiments, we're seeing, again, localized spikes in radiation that are parallel to like a nuclear bomb going off. So like if you stood in that exact spot when that occurred, you'd probably have issues. But immediately before or immediately after that spike of radiation, they're seeing an increase in activity localized to that spot. So they might hear something, they might pick up something on the DVR, they might, those sorts of things. So, if you have some tool, something that's, outside of the box, don't be afraid to incorporate it. I think the biggest thing is always utilizing devices in parallel. I don't think any of the devices that we showed tonight we utilize just in and of themselves. I've never seen somebody run a PSB7 where they're not recording it, for example, and they're not going back and listening for EVPs on top of that that aren't coming out of the PSB7, but are also, just EVPs that are, above that device. So, utilize things in parallel. That's where you get some of these experimental devices that we talked about, partnering them up with something that's tried and true, and you have a little bit more plausibility when you say, hey, I got something on my spirit box, but you also got something else that happened at the same time. That's those correlations. It's not just happening. There's a reason for that.
There's new discoveries are made two ways: by experimenting or by accident. So experiment. I love to experiment. Scientific or not, I mean, who knows? Maybe it will be scientific someday, something that you're doing. So don't be afraid. If you can think it, do it. Just if you're giving a report to a client as far as evidence goes, it depends on what you want to consider evidence. Is it scientific, personal experience, or other? That's something you want to look into when you're doing some of these experimental things. So
Mhm. A
it's
flashlight turning off and on by itself is not evidence.
no.
But I've had some really cool flashlight sessions, but I have always considered that again, it's experimental. Partner that up with something else that you can prove to me without a doubt that it is preternatural. It is not something that can be explained by normal physics, normal law of how the world and the universe works. Um, get rid of all that. Make sure you have discounted all of that before you tell me something is paranormal. And that's very important. Like Philip said, taking it to a client. Um, hey, this flashlight over here, it turned on and off a few times when we were asking questions.
Your house wanted.
You know, don't do that, please. Jen, yes, a vibration can turn a flashlight on. That could be like a whole topic in and of itself, is the mag lights. And
Something I do,
flashlight
I
sessions.
like to experiment with them. I have two mag lights. One's blue, one's red. I think I've said this before. One has yes written on it. One has no written on it. The lenses are the corresponding colors to the flashlights, and I'll put those side by side and use it as a yes and no communication tool. I mean, that's a little bit more narrowing the field down, other than just 5 random flashlights in a room and saying, turn on a flashlight.
100%. If you can put some logic around it, where it's like, I know a lot of people, and myself included, because sometimes I'm just trying to see if I can get it to work. But a lot of people will be like, okay, turn it on if yes, keep it off if no. Well, what if it just stays off the entire time, and all of the questions that you have, the spirit there is just answering no to everything, so it never turns on the flashlight, and you're like, oh, there's nothing here. Um, you know, if you do something like Philip said, where it's like, okay, we've got the blue flashlight here, we've got the green flashlight here, we've got the red flashlight. I mean, I've seen people set out a whole array of flashlight colors and light colors, and answers. I know another team that I saw, they did it in a pinwheel almost, and they had yes, no, just other random things that could answer those questions. So it's more than just a yes and no conversation, but it can be more in depth. And that's fairly cheap. It's inexpensive. Again, it's experimental. You need to show me something else at the same time, because we know that flashlights can be turned on and off by vibration. They can be turned on and off by heat, and the change of temperature, the differential, can affect those. There's tons of different things that can, and that's the same thing with everything. I mean, that's the same thing with the SLS camera. Not saying that there's not valid evidence. It's just make sure that when you are going through and utilizing these devices, that you are utilizing this at the same time, because that's the most important tool that you have in trying to understand and decipher what you are experiencing, and the data that you are looking through.
And something to keep in mind when you're going to put out equipment and use equipment, spirits may not be able to read. I mean, they may have not been educated. So when you're saying turn on the yes, hit the yes, they don't know what yes is. So that's why you should try corresponding colors. And please, when you go into a location, explain each of the pieces of equipment instead of just saying, touch the K2, touch the REM pod. A 150-year-old spirit has no clue what a K2 meter is. I mean, so think about these things. You're dealing with.
My dad doesn't even know what a K2 meter
Exactly.
is. So.
Exactly. I have a red X on top of my K2, and I'll say, can you touch the red X on that black box there? Something like that. But explain these things. I mean, you may get more cooperation when you're nicer. And I mean, these people were people at one time. They're like me and you. And the more you explain, maybe the more comfortable. I mean, hopefully it's not a demon, because then just forget it, you're screwed. But if it's a spirit, be nice, be kind.
And also demonstrate it. I mean, I've actually walked over, touched the equipment, got a reaction, and while I'm doing it, saying, this will not hurt you. Look, I'm doing it. Nothing's happening to me. Because 150 years ago, they don't know, touch this thing and lights come on. That's scary.
Witchcraft
So,
right there, Linda. That's witchcraft.
It's right.
Yeah.
Magic happening. So if you go over and actually demonstrate it too, you get some better cooperation that way.
Jen asked in chat, you might have mentioned them, but what about Polaroid cameras? Have you compared these to digital cameras?
You say Polaroid cameras? Like,
Polaroid, where it's like taking the picture and printing it out right on, right on the sheet. I personally, we've used both, Jen. Haven't really seen any difference in terms of like getting any anomalous objects in the camera in the picture. I think the older you go, it really depends on the film medium. And so, if you have scratches on the medium, like on the printing paper itself, you'll see issues with that. A lot of the, your digital cameras, your DSLRs, even your cell phone, take some great pictures, and they're not, I guess they're not prohibited by the medium that is being printed onto it. It's much more higher depth, excuse me. And so, like the Polaroid cameras, I know some of the newer ones actually are pretty high depth, but I see a lot of people like to use the old ones, and they get those old grainy, pictures, which are really neat. But they aren't, it's not 4K. It's not taking a really high resolution picture. And so some things could be blurry.
There are definitely things that a full spectrum digital camera are going to see that our eyes don't see. We used ours. I was sitting at a table at a house, and one of my teammates was taking pictures with it, and there was a black huge mass coming out of the ceiling beside of me that I couldn't see, but it showed up in the full spectrum pictures. Use everything. If you've got a Polaroid, use it. You just never know what's going to happen.
Craig asked, what's your thoughts on using an older analog tape recorder for EVPs versus a digital?
I have a cassette player that I use, a small cassette player that I've gotten EVPs on. I mean, I use them. It's what they used in the beginning, before, after Thomas Edison. So.
Yeah, we use them also. We've got a couple.
I think it really depends on the equipment itself. Some of the earlier ones, and I haven't done the research to prove this, but I would probably presume that the earlier audio recorders just focused on recording audio, and wasn't like, okay, human voice was within this frequency, we're only going to record in this, and then we're going to negate everything else. I have a feeling that's probably how it worked, and so you probably have a good chance of getting. I mean, I've seen people get EVPs on cell phones, so you're probably going to get EVPs on it. I think it really depends. Again, looking at the frequency range that your recorder can pick up. The analog tape recorders, perfectly fine if that's what you have to use. The only downside to them, again, is you can't connect them to your computer. It is a little bit more difficult. There is a little bit more, a little bit longer of a road to get that into a medium that you can safely store, or do any data analysis, look at a spectrograph of your audio, those sorts of things. It's definitely a lot harder to look at from an analog format. So just keep that in mind when you are picking out a recorder. If you go for something older, I know a lot of people like to, I can't remember the name of it, but there is one recorder that like is the holy grail.
Oh Lord, the DR60.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen EVPs on just about every recorder that anybody has ever walked up to me with. And like,
DR60 sells for about $1,800 if you can get one on auction. eBay, which a friend of mine just sold one of his for $1,800. You couldn't give me one personally because it just sounds like a bunch of static. But all the TV shows, they have DR60s, so if it's on TV, it's got to be good, right?
Absolutely.
And they're so rare and on television. That's why they can ask such crazy prices for them, but they just sound horrible, in my opinion. I'll probably get hate mail, but in my opinion.
I mean, I like to look for audio recorders that, again, the largest range of frequency that I can get, the lowest that it can go, and the highest that it can get. If I can get something that will encompass all of that, and not just record. I mean, there are audio recorders that are solely focused on picking up you speaking, or there's a lot that are I kind of like focus towards taking them to university, so that you can record a professor. And those where they're only picking up that very specific range are probably going to be harder to utilize for investigating. Not saying they won't work, but the wider the frequency, the bigger net that you're casting.
Got anything, Heather, you want to throw in?
I usually use the non-tech tools, so we'll have to cover that on another one.
Yeah,
But
a whole class on.
yeah, just a quick tip though. Something we discovered is when you get your batteries, make sure they're higher quality batteries and that they're shielded. Because we used generic ones and our EMF detector was just, or our K2 meter was just going off the whole time until we realized what we did.
Yes, high quality. I made the mistake and went to Big Lots and got those Rayovacs for like 40 for $1. I mean, I was thrilled, but yeah, that's not so good.
Replace the battery every 10 minutes.
And then so much EMF coming off just the battery because they're getting ready to explode.
I'll say I use, in terms of cheap, because I'm all about saving money, I actually use Amazon's. They have Amazon Basics, and you can buy a bunch of those for cheap. They come to your house, so you don't need to traverse the lands of Walmart. And they're cheap, but they're reliable. I'm able to get a really good life out of them. They're not spitting off electricity into the air that it's going to kick off my K2 consistently or anything like that. So
Good, good.
Before I get mine.
Any other questions coming in? 'Cause I think
no other questions. So
almost
I think
at
we're
the
good.
2 hour mark, so everybody's going to fall asleep now. Anybody have anything else they want to add?
Nothing here.
Well,
Nope.
great. I can't wait to read the comments, and I hope everybody enjoyed it. We would love feedback. Please, we don't know what to give you if you don't tell us what you need. So please give us some feedback. We think this is definitely something all the new people should be aware of, is equipment and how to use it. So let us know, and let us know that you enjoyed this tonight. We'd really appreciate it. This being our first one for our new page. And we got some other things coming up, and we'll get those on the page soon. It takes a lot of planning to get these together because we like to have everything organized. I'm a little OCD. I like everything lined up. Yeah, they haven't noticed that at all. But thank you all. I appreciate it. And thank you for watching. And we're going to say good night and see you next time.
Before we leave,
Mhm.
Bob brings up a really good point.
All right.
Rechargeable batteries is the way to go, 110%. If you can use rechargeable batteries and get a longer life than literally filling the dump with your batteries, because you will go through batteries like a professional, highly recommend it.
I had some rechargeable 9 volts, but that wouldn't actually work in some of my equipment. And I don't know why. I'm not educated enough on rechargeable batteries and the different types. So maybe I need to talk to Bob. I did something wrong when I bought them. All right. Any other things real fast before we go? Anybody?
Craig asks if we could make the PowerPoint tonight available for download.
Well, we're going to post this video. Hopefully I'm recording. So he can watch it and pause, stop it, take notes, whatever he needs to do, watch it as many times. So, and, it's going to stay on our page. So, but the PowerPoint, it's actually for my team, my personal team. I took out a few of our pictures. This was one I was going to give it a presentation that's been canceled. So, but yeah, you'll be able, he can watch this one over and over if that's okay.
Okay.
That's it. All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Night.